The letter was already open when I realized my hands were shaking. I don't remember tearing the envelope. I don't remember sitting down. I only remember the way the paper felt thinner than it should have been. Like it had already been worn by someone else's fear before it reached me. Julian Wolfe, it began. No greeting. No respect for the name I'd spent my life building. If you want to know what your restaurant really feeds on, come see it yourself. I read that line 3 times. Outside my office window, Manhattan hummed the way it always did. Horns, voices, the low mechanical breath of a city that never asks permission to keep going. Inside, the air felt still, like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. The Marigold was my pride, my flagship. The restaurant Garrett Sloan and I had dreamed up together back when success was still hypothetical, and our suits smelled like borrowed confidence. Garrett had been my best friend since college. If anyone understood the soul of my company, it was him. The letter didn't sound like a prank. It didn't sound angry enough to be revenge. It was quiet, precise, and it ended with a sentence I couldn't shake. Ask the night staff about their paychecks. Ask the mothers about their breaks. Ask the ones who don't complain because they can't afford to. I folded the paper carefully, the way you do with something fragile, and slipped it into my desk drawer. I told myself I'd look into it through the proper channels. Audits, reports, lawyers. That was the lie I told myself before lunch. Before that letter, my life had a rhythm I trusted. I woke up early in my penthouse on the Upper West Side, made coffee I rarely finished, and scanned numbers that told me how well other people were living. Revenue curves, expansion plans, a future that always felt slightly ahead of me, like a train I was proud to have built but never rode. I ate most of my meals alone. Not because I was lonely, I told myself I liked the quiet, but because conversation felt inefficient after a while. At dinners, people waited for me to speak, laughed a half-second too late at my jokes, and asked questions they already knew the answers to. Garrett was the exception. He didn't flatter. He teased me for forgetting birthdays, for dressing like a man who thought gray was a personality. When he talked about the Marigold, his voice softened. He cared about food the way some people care about prayer. Trust me, he used to say, clapping a hand on my shoulder. I run that place like family. I believed him. That belief was the bedrock under everything else. The Marigold itself was all warm, light, and polished wood. The kind of place where menus didn't list prices and the bread came out hot enough to fog your glasses. Critics loved it. Influencers staged photos like pilgrimages. Investors called it a brand with a soul. I hadn't worked a shift in one of my own restaurants in over 15 years. Somewhere along the way, I decided leadership meant distance. The letter made that distance feel dangerous. For a week, I tried to forget it. I attended board meetings, signed off on a new location in Chicago, toasted to another record quarter with a glass of wine I didn't taste. Every night, though, the words came back. Ask the mothers about their breaks. On the 7th night, I couldn't sleep. The city lights pressed against my windows like witnesses. I got up, opened the desk drawer, and unfolded the letter again. This time, I noticed something I hadn't before: grease smudges along the edge of the paper. Not ink, not dirt. Kitchen grease. By morning, I had a plan that scared me enough to feel honest. I told my assistant I was taking a leave. Personal reasons. I told Garrett I wanted to surprise the staff one night. Eat anonymously. Observe the flow. He laughed. You undercover? He said. Julian, you don't even know how to hold a tray. Then it'll be educational, I said, keeping my tone light. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already applied for a job. My name, for the first time in decades, was Daniel Brooks. I borrowed an old pair of black slacks and scuffed them deliberately. Bought non-slip shoes that pinched my toes. When I walked into the Marigold's back entrance for my interview, the smell hit me first. Onions, bleach, something burnt and sweet underneath it all. The manager on duty barely looked up from his clipboard. Experience? He asked. Some, I said, which felt like the truest lie I'd told in years. He nodded. You'll start nights. No overtime approval unless I say so. Breaks are flexible. Flexible? He smiled like that was a gift. I was handed an apron still damp from the wash and shown where to clock in. No one asked for my last name. No one asked where I came from. They needed hands, not history. That was when I noticed her. She was rolling silverware at a corner table, her hair pulled back in a loose knot that kept slipping free. She moved with the careful efficiency of someone conserving energy. When she stood, she pressed a hand briefly to her chest before lifting a tray. You good? Another server asked. Yeah, she said, smiling too quickly. Just asthma acting up. Her name tag read Isla. Later, in the cramped break area that smelled like coffee grounds and exhaustion, she sat across from me, eating half a sandwich and wrapping the other half back up like it mattered. First week? She asked. First night, I said. She nodded, understanding something unspoken. Don't let them rush you too hard. They always do. Who's they? I asked. She glanced toward the office door, then back at me. You'll learn. When her phone buzzed, she checked it fast, worry flickering across her face before she tucked it away. My daughter, she said, unprompted. Babysitter texts when her breathing gets bad. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only honest thing. That must be hard. She looked at me for a long moment, then gave a small, tired laugh. Yeah, but rent doesn't care. That night, my feet throbbed, my hands shook, and I spilled water on a guest who waved it off like I was invisible. I clocked out an hour late and noticed it wasn't recorded. When I asked, the manager shrugged. System glitch. Happens. As I walked out into the cool night air, apron folded under my arm, I realized something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't one bad shift. This was a life I'd been profiting from without ever learning its name. And I had a feeling the letter was only the beginning. By the end of my first week, my body learned a new language. My shoulders spoke in dull aches. My calves burned like they were being slowly cauterized. My hands, once accustomed to pens and polished wood desks, were nicked and dry, smelling permanently of lemon and soap no matter how much I scrubbed. What surprised me wasn't the work itself. It was the way time bent around it. Shifts stretched past what the schedule promised, folding into one another until days felt like smudges instead of lines. Breaks were theoretical, something you earned by being fast enough not to need them. I watched servers sip water in the walk-in cooler, heads tilted back like thieves stealing oxygen. Every night, the same quiet rituals played out. Someone clocked out late and pretended not to notice. Someone else covered a shift they'd been pressured into taking. Tips disappeared into a shared pool no one ever explained. When questions were asked, answers came with smiles sharpened just enough to draw blood. Garrett wasn't there most nights. He swept through once or twice a week, shaking hands, tasting sauces, being admired. When he was present, managers stood straighter. The exploitation didn't stop it, just learned how to whisper. Isla became my anchor without either of us naming it. She moved through the dining room with a careful grace, like she was balancing something precious just out of sight. When a table snapped their fingers at her, she didn't flinch, just inhaled slowly, the way people do when they're counting down from 10. You don't have to let them talk to you like that, I said once, after a man had complained that his steak was too emotional. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I do, actually. Later, while refilling bread baskets, she told me about Maeve. 6 years old. Bright, stubborn, obsessed with drawing animals that always had wings. Severe asthma. Hospital visits that came without warning. Inhalers in every bag. A nebulizer that hummed through the night like a second heartbeat. She hates the sound, Isla said, twisting a napkin. Says it makes her feel like a robot. I tell her she's more like a dragon. Strong lungs just waiting to learn how to breathe fire. I laughed before I could stop myself. It felt good, foreign and good. How old are you? She asked. 38, I said, which was true enough. She nodded. You don't look it. You look like someone who used to sleep more. That night, when I checked my pay stub, the numbers didn't add up. I counted my hours twice. Then again. The total was short by nearly 6. When I brought it up, the manager Todd leaned back in his chair like I just asked him for a favor. Tips even it out, he said. That's the industry. I thought tips were separate, I said carefully. Todd's smile tightened. Daniel, right? You don't want to make waves your first week. I thought of the letter. Ask the ones who don't complain because they can't afford to. I nodded and walked away. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. It wasn't just the money. I saw a dishwasher burn his arm and wrap it in a towel because he didn't have insurance. I saw a hostess sent home early for being too slow, her tips redistributed before she could object. I saw Isla cough through an entire shift, her inhaler used so often the plastic squeaked. One night, she leaned against the counter in the service station, eyes closed. You should sit, I said. I can't, she replied. If I sit, they'll cut me. For resting? For being inconvenient. The words sat between us, heavy and exact. The breaking point came on a Thursday, during a private event upstairs. Politicians, investors, the kind of crowd that laughed loud and tipped quietly. Isla was scheduled until 10. At 10:30, she was still running plates. My babysitter has to leave, she told Todd, voice tight. I need to go. He looked at her like she'd spilled something expensive. You leave. You don't come back tomorrow. Her shoulders slumped, just slightly. I'll finish the floor. At 11:15, she bent over suddenly, coughing so hard she had to brace herself against a chair. I reached her first, handing her my water. Go, I said. I'll cover. Todd appeared like a summoned ghost. That's not how this works. Isla looked between us, panic flickering. Please. Something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. Like a bone cracking under pressure you didn't know it was holding. She's leaving, I said. Todd's eyes narrowed. And who are you? For a moment, the truth pressed against my teeth. Julian Wolfe. Owner. Billionaire. Untouchable. But that wasn't who mattered in that moment. I'm someone who's done, I said. Todd laughed. Then you're fired. Isla's face drained of color. No, don't. It's fine, I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice was. Go check on your daughter. She hesitated, then grabbed her bag, eyes shining. Thank you, she whispered. I won't forget this. I didn't clock out. I just walked outside. The city felt louder than usual. My phone buzzed as soon as I stepped away from the building. Garrett. Why am I hearing that you caused a scene? He asked, irritation thinly veiled. I didn't, I said. I watched one. There was a pause. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk. That night, back in my penthouse, the space felt obscene. The silence, the art, the food in my fridge that no one would notice if it went bad. I thought about Isla counting minutes, about Maeve breathing through plastic tubes, about all the times I'd said family without knowing what it cost. The letter hadn't lied, but it also hadn't warned me how deeply this would cut. And I knew, with a certainty that scared me, that Garrett wasn't going to let this go quietly. Garrett's office at the Marigold overlooked the dining room like a watchtower. The glass walls were meant to suggest transparency. What they really did was remind everyone who was above and who was below. I arrived early the next afternoon, dressed the way Daniel Brooks would, plain jacket, worn shoes, no watch worth noticing. Garrett was already there, leaning against his desk, scrolling through his phone as if nothing in the world demanded his full attention. Daniel, he said without looking up. Or should I say, dramatic employee of the month. I closed the door behind me. The click sounded final. You fired a single mother for having an asthma attack, I said. Garrett finally looked up, annoyance flickering into something sharper. I fired someone for leaving their station during a paid event. She asked to leave, I said. You threatened her. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Julian, you're emotional because you played dress-up for a week. This is how restaurants work. I studied his face, the familiar angles, the charm I'd defended in rooms full of skeptics. I saw now how practiced it was. She wasn't paid for the extra hours, I said. Neither was I. Tips are being skimmed. Breaks are being denied. You're preying on people who can't fight back. Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I built this place by being soft? I think you built it by forgetting what soft feels like, I said. His jaw tightened. Be careful. That was the first time he'd ever said that to me. Why? I asked. Because I'm asking questions? Because you're undermining authority, he said. Mine. The word hung there, ugly and exposed. I'm the owner, I said quietly. And I run the place, he shot back. Or did, until you decided to play hero. I thought of Isla's eyes when she'd whispered, thank you, of Maeve's dragon drawings, of the letter written by hands that smelled like grease and fear. This ends, I said. Now. Garrett stared at me, something calculating shifting behind his eyes. Then he smiled. We'll see. The next shift felt different. Whispers followed me. Eyes tracked me. Todd avoided me entirely. When I clocked in, my name had been circled in red. Isla wasn't there. I asked around, keeping my voice casual. No one knew anything, or no one wanted to. Halfway through service, Garrett appeared on the floor, clapping his hands for attention. Quick announcement, he said, voice carrying. Before we continue, my stomach dropped. We've had an interesting situation, he went on. One of our servers hasn't been entirely honest about who he is. He looked directly at me. Daniel Brooks, he said, smiling wide. Or should I say Julian Wolfe? The room went silent in a way that felt violent. Every head turned, every breath held. I felt something break not inside me, but between me and everyone else. The fragile bridge of trust I'd built, shift by shift, smile by smile. I wanted to see how my restaurant was being run, I said, forcing calm into my voice. Garrett chuckled. Isn't that noble? Slumming it with the staff. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else swore under their breath. You lied to us, a server said. You watched us struggle. I worked alongside you, I said. I struggled too. That's not the same, another voice snapped. Garrett raised a hand. Let's all remember who signs the checks. The humiliation was precise, surgical. I searched the room for Isla, knowing she wouldn't be there and hating myself for hoping. Effective immediately, Garrett said. Daniel Brooks no longer works here. The words hit like a slap. Even though I'd already been fired once, I removed my apron slowly, folding it the way I always did, and placed it on the host stand. "I'm sorry," I said, to no one and everyone. For the lie, not for the truth. As I walked out, the dining room resumed its noise, louder than before, like a crowd relieved to be entertained again. The fallout was immediate. My phone lit up with messages, board members, lawyers, PR teams. Garrett had moved fast, framing the story as a billionaire stunt gone wrong. Headlines followed. Tycoon poses as waiter, sparks chaos. I deserved some of it, but the story missed the point. It always does. I requested payroll records, security footage, HR complaints that had been quietly buried. What came back was worse than the letter had suggested. Wage theft, unsafe conditions, retaliation. All documented, all ignored. When I called Isla, my hands shook. She answered on the third ring. "Hello? It's me," I said. "Julian." Silence. Then, cold and controlled. "Why are you calling?" I wanted to explain. "You exposed yourself," she said. "Not them." "I'm fixing it," I said. "I promise." "Promises don't buy inhalers," she replied. "Don't contact me again." The line went dead. That hurt more than the headlines. The confrontation with Garrett happened in the same office where we'd once toasted our first success. He looked tired now, cornered. "You threw me to the wolves," he said. "You fed them," I replied. I terminated him on the spot, filed reports, opened restitution funds, paid back every stolen dollar, with interest, changed policies, installed oversight. It felt necessary. It did not feel redemptive. A year passed. I didn't return to the Marigold as an owner. I couldn't. I sold my stake, stepped away from the empire I'd built on borrowed suffering. I worked, really worked. Nonprofits, kitchens, places where my name meant nothing. One evening, at a small community dinner, I saw Isla. She was serving soup, laughing softly as Maeve tugged at her sleeve, dragon wings drawn in green marker flapping proudly. She looked at me, really looked, then nodded once. Not forgiveness, but not nothing. I learned, over that year, how long accountability actually takes. Not the public kind the press releases. The statements written in careful language that sanded down the truth until it fit on a screen. That part moved quickly. Lawyers knew how to build clean lines between blame and reform. Consultants taught me which words sounded like humility without costing too much. But real accountability was slower, quieter. It didn't clap when you walked into a room. I volunteered in kitchens where no one asked my last name. I washed dishes beside men who'd lost their homes, and women who carried their lives in plastic bags. I learned how to listen without planning a response. How to let silence finish its own sentences. Some nights, I still dreamed about the Marigold. Not the dining room, the back. The narrow hallway by the walk-in freezer where Isla used to stand with her eyes closed, breathing through discomfort because she didn't have the luxury of collapse. I'd wake up with the phantom smell of bleach in my nose and the old weight in my chest. I didn't try to see her again. Not at first. Respect, I was learning, often looks like distance. The community dinner where our paths crossed again happened on a rainy Tuesday. The kind of rain that soaks through your collar and makes umbrellas feel useless. I'd been helping chop vegetables when I heard a child laugh, a bright, unguarded sound that cut through the low murmur of the room. Malva. She was taller than I remembered. Her hair pulled back with a clip shaped like a butterfly. She held a paper plate with both hands like it mattered. Isla stood beside her, sleeves rolled up, her movements looser than they'd been at the Marigold. Still careful, but no longer braced for impact. She saw me, paused, then gave that small nod. I didn't approach. I didn't wave. I let the moment be what it was. Acknowledgement without demand. At the end of the night, as chairs scraped and volunteers said their goodbyes, Isla walked over. "You can help stack those," she said, nodding at a pile of folding chairs. I did. We worked side by side, the metal cool under our palms. "She's doing better," Isla said finally, glancing toward Maeve. "New medication." "I'm glad," I said. It came out rougher than I meant it to. She studied me for a moment. "You didn't have to keep coming." "I know," I said. "So why do you?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was tired, earnest. "Because I need to," I said. "Not to be forgiven. Just to be better at not looking away." She nodded once. "That's different." It wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't a wall. We started with small things. I'd show up early and leave late. We'd exchange a few words about the weather, the food, Maeve's latest drawing. Dragons mostly. Sometimes cats with wings. Months passed. Seasons changed. I found a small apartment closer to the kitchen. Sold the penthouse. The echo in those rooms had started to feel accusatory. I took a job managing a local cafe, no ownership, no safety net. When a barista called in sick, I covered. When a register came up short, I checked the math before assuming intent. Once, during a rush, a young server froze, panic widening her eyes as tickets piled up. Take a breath, I told her gently. We'll catch up. Later, she thanked me like I'd done something extraordinary. I hadn't. That was the point. Isla came in one afternoon with Maeve. They sat by the window, sharing a grilled cheese cut neatly down the middle. Daniel, Maeve said, waving. Mama says you're learning. I laughed, surprised. I am. Learning what? She asked. How to be kinder, I said. She considered this, then nodded solemnly. That's important. Isla met my eyes over her daughter's head. Something softened. Trust didn't arrive all at once. It came in increments. In Isla letting me walk them home when the streetlights flickered on. In her asking my opinion about a school form. In Maeve handing me a drawing without hesitation. One evening, as we washed dishes together after a late dinner at the cafe, Isla spoke without looking up. You hurt people, she said. Yes, I replied. And you don't get to undo that. I know. She turned then, water dripping from her hands. But you don't pretend you can. No, I said. I don't. That was the night she stayed for tea. We never talked about love the way movies do. It grew in the in-between spaces, in shared grocery lists. In the way Maeve started saving the end piece of bread for me because she knew I liked it toasted. In Isla leaning against the counter while I cooked, her presence steady, unafraid. I stayed Daniel, not because Julian was a lie, but because Daniel was a promise to keep my hands in the work, my eyes open, my name irrelevant. A year after the letter, we shared a meal at a small table by the window. Maeve talked about dragons learning to breathe underwater. Isla laughed, unguarded. I watched them and felt something settle into place. Not triumph, not redemption. Belonging. Quiet. Earned. Ongoing. I thought about the man I'd been, the distance, the assumptions, the comfort built on other people's endurance. And I thought about the simple, profound kindness of a shared meal. That, I'd learned, was where real change begins. Sometimes I think about that first letter the way it arrived without ceremony, without anger, without asking for permission to change my life. It didn't demand justice. It didn't threaten exposure. It just asked me to look. And for a long time, I had built a life around not doing that. I learned something I didn't expect through all of this. Redemption isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with applause or forgiveness wrapped neatly in a bow. Most days, it looks like showing up when no one is watching. Like listening when it would be easier to explain. Like choosing discomfort over convenience again and again, until it becomes habit. Isla never thanked me for the reforms. Maeve never knew the man I used to be. And that feels right. Change shouldn't require witnesses to be real. What I gained wasn't a second chance because I was powerful. I earned one because I was willing to become small enough to learn. These days, when we sit down to eat 3 plates, mismatched forks, Maeve narrating a story that makes sense only to her, I feel fuller than I ever did at tables where the food cost more than a week's wages. Because kindness tastes different when it's shared. Because dignity, once restored, feeds more than hunger. And because trust, once broken, is not repaired by words but by time, humility, and consistency. So I'll leave you with this question. The same one that letter quietly asked me. If you discovered the truth about the life you'd built, really discovered it, would you be brave enough to step into it? Even if it meant becoming someone new. If this story stayed with you, sit with that feeling a little longer. And if you've ever been the one who couldn't afford to complain, know this, you were never invisible. Someone just needed to learn how to see. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments.